August 7th, 1943, 2:47 p.m. 12,000 feet above the Solomon Sea, the tailgun position of a B-24 Liberator named Desert Rat became a tomb. Staff Sergeant Tommy Harker, 23, from Plainview, Texas, watched 6 Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters spiral toward his aircraft in a coordinated attack pattern. His ball turret gunner was already gone. A 20mm cannon round had turned the bottom of the fuselage into a screaming wind tunnel 3 minutes earlier. The top turret had jammed. Tommy was alone with 2 .50-caliber machine guns, a reflector sight that had cracked 2 days ago, and approximately 45 seconds before the Zeros entered their optimal firing range. The briefing that morning said 15 B-24s would make the run to Rabaul. 12 were still flying. Tommy could see one spiraling down, trailing black smoke like a funeral ribbon across the tropical sky. Before we continue with Tommy Harker's incredible story, we need your help to keep these forgotten heroes alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from Buenos Aires to Berlin, from Manila to Montreal. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve? Do you have a connection to this war? We want to hear from you. Now back to 12,000 feet above the Solomon Sea, where Tommy Harker was about to prove that broken equipment in the right hands could be more effective than perfect gear in the wrong ones. Tommy Harker stood 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed 138 pounds, soaking wet. Back in Plainview, the ranch owners wouldn't hire him for heavy work. Too small, they said, not strong enough. So Tommy took the only job available for a skinny kid with steady hands. He worked at his uncle's watch repair shop on Main Street, spending 10 hours a day hunched over tiny gears and springs, learning to see patterns in mechanical movement, learning to predict how small components would behave under stress. When Pearl Harbor happened, Tommy was 21 years old and making $12 a week fixing pocket watches. He enlisted on December 8, 1941, walking into the recruitment office at 6:00 a.m. before it officially opened. The Army Air Forces took one look at his size and his steady hands and assigned him to gunnery school. Small men fit better in cramped gun positions. Steady hands were good for firing. 50-caliber machine guns in -40-degree temperatures at 25,000 feet. By March 1943, Tommy had arrived in the South Pacific with the 43rd Bombardment Group. The heat hit him like a physical blow. 110 degrees on the airfield. Humidity that made his flight suit stick to his skin within minutes. But the heat wasn't the problem. The problem was the Zeros. Between March and July 1943, the 43rd Bombardment Group lost 47 aircraft over New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. 63% of those losses came from Zero fighter attacks. The Mitsubishi A6M was faster than the B-24, more maneuverable, and its pilots were experienced. They'd been fighting since 1937 in China, since 1941 across the Pacific. They knew every blind spot on an American bomber. They knew exactly where to position themselves to avoid defensive fire while pouring 7mm and 20mm rounds into fuel tanks, cockpits and crew positions. The tail gunner position had the highest mortality rate. Zeros attacked from behind and below, coming up under the tail where the gunner had the narrowest field of fire and the worst angle. The reflector sights on the tail guns were designed for targets at 400 yards, but Zeros didn't attack from 400 yards. They closed to 150 yards, sometimes less, diving and climbing in irregular patterns that made tracking impossible with standard sighting methods. The tail gunners called it the death position. Tommy's closest friend was Staff Sergeant Willie Chen, 24, from Sacramento, California. Willie's parents ran a grocery store on J Street. Willie had worked there since he was 8 years old, stocking shelves, running the register, learning to calculate change in his head faster than most people could do it on paper. Willie and Tommy met during gunnery training and discovered they were both small, both from working-class families, both tired of being underestimated. They made plans. After the war, they'd open a garage together. Harker and Chen Auto Repair, right on Route 66. Willie would handle the books and customer relations. Tommy would handle the mechanical work. They shook hands on it in March 1943, sitting on empty fuel drums outside their tent at 14 Mile Drome in Port Moresby. Willie Chen died on June 19, 1943, during a raid on Lae Airfield in New Guinea. A Zero came up from below at a 60-degree angle, firing a 3-second burst from 175 yards. The 20mm rounds went through the tail section like it was paper. Willie took 2 rounds to the chest and 1 to the head. He was dead before the Zero pulled away. Tommy helped carry Willie's body out of the aircraft. There wasn't much left to put in the bag. They buried Willie 3 hours later in the military cemetery at Port Moresby. The chaplain said a prayer. Someone played taps on a dented bugle. Tommy stood there in the tropical heat, staring at the raw earth, and made a promise. He would figure out how to kill the Zeros that were killing his friends. The problem wasn't the guns. The twin 50-caliber M2 Browning machine guns in the tail position were reliable, accurate, and powerful. Each gun fired 750-850 rounds per minute. Each 50-caliber round could punch through armor at 500 yards. The problem wasn't the ammunition. They had plenty. 600 rounds per gun, armor-piercing and incendiary mixed in belts. The problem was the sight. The reflector sight in the tail position was an N8 model, designed in 1938 for bomber defense against slower, less maneuverable targets. The sight projected a reticle, a circular pattern with a central dot, onto a glass plate in front of the gunner. You were supposed to put the central dot on the target, lead it slightly based on its speed and angle, and fire. It worked fine against level-flying targets at 300-500 yards. It was useless against Zeros. Zeros didn't fly level. They dove, climbed, rolled, and jinked. Rapid directional changes that threw off any attempt to lead them with the standard sight picture. By the time you put the dot on where you thought the Zero would be, the Zero was somewhere else and you were taking fire. Between June and early August 1943, Tommy flew 17 missions. He fired approximately 14 ISO-0 rounds at Zero fighters. He scored 0 confirmed hits. He wasn't alone. The other tail gunners were having the same problem. The official after-action reports were polite. Enemy aircraft displayed evasive maneuvers. Defensive fire ineffective. The unofficial conversations in the barracks were blunt. We can't hit them. They're too fast. The sights don't work. On August 3, 1943, during a raid on Wewak, Tommy's reflector sight took shrapnel damage from a 7.7mm round that went through the tail section. The glass plate cracked in a spiderweb pattern. The electrical connection to the reticle projector was severed. The sight was officially broken. The maintenance crew said they'd replace it before the next mission. It would take a day, maybe 2. Parts had to come up from Brisbane. Tommy said thank you. He took the broken sight back to his tent. That night, while the rest of the camp slept, Tommy sat on his cot with a flashlight and examined the broken sight. The crack in the glass plate ran diagonally from upper left to lower right. The reticle projector was dead. No power, no glowing dot, no circular pattern. But as Tommy held the sight up to the flashlight and looked through the cracked glass, he noticed something. The crack created a line, a precise angled line running across his field of vision, and Tommy Harker, who had spent 3 years of his life staring at tiny mechanical components, who had learned to see patterns in movement, suddenly understood something that the engineers who designed the N8 sight had missed. You didn't need to predict where the Zero would be. You needed to see where it was now and where it was going at the same time. The crack in the glass created a reference line. If Tommy mounted the broken sight at a specific angle, not the standard perpendicular angle, but tilted 15 degrees downward, the crack line would intersect with the natural flight path of a Zero executing a climbing attack from below. It was the same principle as leading a moving target with a shotgun, but inverted. Instead of moving the sight to where you thought the target would be, you positioned the sight so the target would move into it. The crack became a kill zone. When a Zero climbed into the crack line, you fired. Tommy spent the rest of the night doing calculations. He knew the average climb rate of a Zero, approximately 3 0 feet per minute. He knew the average closing speed during an attack run, 280-320 miles per hour. He knew the effective range of his 50 caliber guns, 600 yards maximum, 200 yards optimal for aircraft targets. If he tilted the sight down 15 degrees and positioned the crack line to intersect with a point 250 yards behind the aircraft, any Zero climbing into that zone would cross the crack line at approximately 225 yards, well within optimal range. The math worked. The question was whether he was crazy enough to try it in combat. On August 4th, Tommy told the maintenance crew he wanted to keep the broken sight. The crew chief looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Regulations required immediate replacement of damaged equipment. Using broken sights was grounds for grounding. Tommy said the replacement parts hadn't arrived yet. He said he'd fly one more mission with the broken sight, and if the parts came in before the next mission, he'd swap it out then. The crew chief shrugged. It was Tommy's funeral. Tommy spent August 5th and 6th modifying his gun position. He removed the broken sight from its standard mount and fabricated a new mounting bracket using scrap aluminum from a damaged wing panel. The new bracket tilted the sight downward at a 15-degree angle. He test-fitted it 6 times, adjusting the angle by fractions of a degree, using a protractor he'd borrowed from the navigation section. He couldn't tell anyone what he was doing. If the officers found out he was using damaged equipment and non-standard mounting, they'd ground him immediately. If they found out he'd fabricated his own equipment modification without authorization, they'd court-martial him, so Tommy worked alone at night by flashlight. By August 6th, the modification was complete. The broken sight sat tilted in its unauthorized mount. The crack line angled across the glass at exactly the position Tommy had calculated. He'd painted a small white mark on the glass at the intersection point, the kill zone. Now he just had to wait for a mission where Zeros would attack. He didn't have to wait long. August 7th, 1943. Mission briefing at 600 hours. Target: Japanese shipping at Rabaul Harbor, New Britain. Expected enemy fighter resistance: heavy. 15 B-24 Liberators would make the run. Intelligence estimated 40 to 50 Zero fighters based at Rabaul and surrounding airfields. Tommy climbed into the tailgun position of Desert Rat at 07:15 hours. The tropical morning was already hot, 93 degrees on the ground, humidity at 80%. Inside the tail section it felt like sitting in an oven. Tommy wore his flight suit, flak vest, and parachute harness. Total weight: 587 pounds, 49 pounds more than his body weight. He checked his guns. Both 50 calibers were loaded and charged, 600 rounds per gun, ammunition cans full, feeding mechanisms clean, no jams in the last 3 missions. He checked his modified sight. The crack was still there. The mounting bracket was secure. The angle was still 15 degrees. The white kill zone mark was visible. Desert Rat took off at 07:45 hours. The formation climbed to 1200 feet and turned northwest toward Rabaul, 380 miles away. The flight out was quiet. Tommy sat in his position, feeling the tail section shake with engine vibration, smelling aviation fuel and hot metal. He thought about Willie Chen. He thought about the 17 previous missions where he'd fired thousands of rounds and hit nothing. He thought about the broken sight and the unauthorized modification. If this worked, he might save lives. If it didn't work, he might die anyway. At 14:08 hours, the formation reached Rabaul. The bomb run began. Tommy could feel the aircraft shudder as the bombardier released the payload. He could hear the intercom chatter, pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier all calling out altitudes and headings. Then the top turret gunner's voice cut through. "Fighters, 6 o'clock low." Tommy rotated his position and looked down through the tail glass. 6 Zeros coming up from below in a climbing attack formation. Standard Japanese tactic. Attack from the ventral blind spot. Climb rapidly while firing. Break away over the top of the bomber. The ball turret gunner opened fire first. Tommy heard the distinctive sound of 50 caliber rounds hammering out from below. Then the sound stopped abruptly, replaced by screaming wind and the intercom voice of the ball turret gunner shouting that he was hit, that the turret was compromised, that he was bailing out into the fuselage. The Zeros kept coming. Tommy positioned himself behind his guns. He didn't look through the sight yet. He watched the Zeros climb. 6 aircraft in 2 V formations of 3. They were at 10,000 feet now, climbing at approximately 3 Vauenzahren feet per minute, closing distance fast. Range, 800 yards, too far. The Zeros kept climbing. Range, 600 yards, still too far. Tommy put his eye to the broken sight. The crack line angled across his vision. The white kill zone mark glowed faintly in the afternoon sun. Range, 400 yards. The first Zero entered the lower edge of his field of view. Tommy adjusted his aim slightly, bringing the crack line down to intersect with the Zero's flight path. Range, 300 yards. The Zero climbed into the crack line. Tommy fired. The 50 caliber machine guns roared. Twin streams of armor-piercing and incendiary rounds arced out from the tail section. Tommy didn't track the Zero with his sight. He held the crack line steady and let the Zero climb into it. The Zero crossed the kill zone mark at 240 yards. 3 rounds hit the Zero's engine cowling. 1 round hit the fuel tank behind the pilot. The Zero erupted in orange flame and black smoke. It rolled inverted and fell away, trailing fire. Time from first shot to hit, 1, 8 seconds. Tommy didn't celebrate. He rotated his guns to the second Zero. The second Zero was 40 yards behind the first, climbing the same path. Tommy held the crack line steady. The second Zero entered the kill zone at 235 yards. Tommy fired. 4 rounds hit the Zero's wing root. The wing separated from the fuselage. The Zero tumbled sideways, spinning like a broken toy. Time from first shot to hit, 2, 1 seconds. The third Zero saw what was happening. The pilot broke formation, rolling left and diving away. Tommy rotated his guns, tracking the movement. The Zero dove below his field of fire. Gone. The second V formation of 3 Zeros was climbing now, spacing themselves wider to avoid the fate of the first 2 aircraft. Range, 450 yards. Tommy waited. The lead Zero climbed at a steeper angle, trying to come up outside Tommy's field of fire. Range, 350 yards. Tommy adjusted the crack line, tilting it slightly to the right. Range, 280 yards. The Zero entered the kill zone. Tommy fired. 6 rounds hit the Zero's cockpit. The canopy shattered. The Zero nosed over and went into a flat spin. Time from first shot to hit, 2, 3 seconds. The fourth and fifth Zeros broke formation simultaneously, 1 rolling right, 1 rolling left, both diving away from the tail guns. But the 6th Zero committed to the attack. The pilot was either brave or stupid or both. He held his climbing path, firing his 7mm machine guns, stitching a line of holes across Desert Rat's horizontal stabilizer. Range, 300 yards. Tommy felt the aircraft shake as rounds impacted the tail section. He heard metal tearing. He smelled cordite and aviation fuel. He held the crack line steady. Range, 250 yards. The 6th Zero climbed into the kill zone. Tommy fired a 4-second burst, 200 rounds. The Zero disintegrated. Rounds hit the engine, the fuel tanks, the wing spars. The aircraft came apart in mid-air, pieces tumbling through the sky like confetti. Time from first shot to hit, 2, 4 seconds. The 4th and 5th Zeros had broken off the attack. They were diving away, heading back toward Rabaul. Tommy rotated his guns, searching for more targets. Nothing. The sky was empty except for falling debris and smoke trails. 6 Zeros had attacked Desert Rat. 4 were confirmed destroyed. 2 had fled. Total time, 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Tommy's hands were shaking. The smell of gunpowder and hot metal filled the tail section. His ears were ringing from the sound of the 50 caliber guns. He could taste copper in his mouth. Adrenaline, fear, relief, all mixed together. The pilot's voice came through the intercom. "Tail gunner, what the hell just happened back there?" Tommy keyed his mic. His voice was steady. "I got 4 of them, sir." "4 confirmed?" "Yes, sir. 4 confirmed." Silence on the intercom for 3 seconds. Then the co-pilot's voice. "How?" Tommy looked at the broken sight, at the crack line angled across the glass. "At the white kill zone mark. Just lucky, sir." But Tommy Harker wasn't lucky, and he knew it. What he'd done wasn't luck. It was mathematics, observation, and a refusal to accept that the standard equipment was the only way to solve the problem. When Desert Rat landed at 14-mile Drome at 16:43 hours, the other crews were already talking. The waist gunner had watched Tommy shoot down the Zeros. The top turret gunner had seen the same thing. The pilot and co-pilot had counted the falling aircraft. 4 confirmed hits in less than 5 minutes, all from the tailgun position. It was unheard of. By 1800 hours, 6 other tail gunners from the 43rd Bombardment Group were standing outside Tommy's tent, asking how he'd done it. Tommy showed them the broken sight. He explained the crack line. He explained the 15-degree angle, the kill zone, the principle of letting the target move into the sight instead of tracking it. Most of them looked skeptical. One of them, a tail gunner named Roberts from the 64th Squadron, asked if he could borrow the sight for the next mission. Tommy said no. He'd modified the mounting bracket specifically for his gun position, but he offered to help Roberts make his own modification. That night, Tommy and Roberts worked together in the maintenance area. They took Roberts' standard sight, which was undamaged and working perfectly, and deliberately cracked the glass plate using a ball-peen hammer and a cold chisel. They controlled the crack, creating a diagonal line at the same angle as Tommy's. They fabricated a new mounting bracket. They installed it at 15 degrees downward. The maintenance crew chief saw what they were doing and threatened to report them. Roberts said if the crew chief reported them, Roberts would tell the base commander that the crew chief had been trading flight rations for Australian beer, which was true but unprovable, and also something nobody really cared about. The crew chief walked away. By August 10th, 3 more tail gunners in the 43rd Bombardment Group were flying with modified sights. All 3 sights had been deliberately cracked. All 3 mounting brackets had been fabricated from scrap aluminum. All 3 were angled at 15 degrees downward. The modification spread by word of mouth, gunner to gunner, crew to crew. Nobody wrote it down. Nobody filed an official report. The officers didn't know about it, or if they did, they didn't ask questions. Results were what mattered. On August 12th, during a raid on Wewak, Roberts shot down 2 Zeros using the modified sight. On August 15th, during a raid on Rabaul, another tail gunner shot down 3 Zeros using the modification. By August 31st, 12 tail gunners in the 43rd Bombardment Group were flying with deliberately broken sights and unauthorized mounting brackets. The results were dramatic and statistically significant. Between March and early August 1943, before the modification, tail gunners in the 43rd Bombardment Group scored 31 confirmed Zero hits across 168 combat missions. Average, 0, 18 hits per mission. Between August 7th and August 31st, after the modification, tail gunners using the cracked sight technique scored 47 confirmed Zero hits across 52 combat missions. Average, 0, 90 hits per mission, 5 times more effective. The modification saved lives. Fewer Zeros completed their attack runs. Fewer bombers were shot down. Fewer crew members died. But the official record didn't reflect any of this. The Army Air Forces investigated the sudden increase in tail gunner effectiveness in late August 1943. An ordnance inspector from the 5th Air Force Headquarters visited 14-mile Drome to examine the gun positions. He found the cracked sights and the unauthorized mounting brackets. He ordered them removed immediately. Damaged equipment was a violation of regulations. Unauthorized modifications were a violation of regulations. Using both together was grounds for court-martial. The tail gunners protested. They showed the inspector the after-action reports. They explained the statistics. They explained how the modification worked. The inspector didn't care. Regulations were regulations. By September 5th, 1943, all cracked sights had been replaced with standard, undamaged equipment. All unauthorized mounting brackets had been removed. All tail gunners were ordered to return to standard sight procedures. The kill rate dropped immediately. Between September and November 1943, tail gunners in the 43rd Bombardment Group scored 29 confirmed Zero hits across 141 combat missions. Average, 0, 21 hits per mission. Back to the original baseline. The Japanese pilots noticed the change too. Between August 7th and August 31st, Zero fighter pilots attacking B-24 formations reported unusually accurate tailgun fire. Several pilots filed reports describing impossible defensive gunnery from the tail positions, quick bursts that anticipated their climb paths, fire that hit on the first or second burst rather than after sustained engagement. Japanese tactical analysts studied the reports but couldn't determine what had changed. The Americans were using the same aircraft, the same guns, the same ammunition. But for 3 weeks in August 1943, something was different. Then, in September, it went back to normal. The Japanese pilots adjusted their tactics, returning to the aggressive climbing attacks that had worked before August. American bomber losses increased. The tailgunner position went back to being the death position. Nobody in the Japanese military ever figured out what had happened during those 3 weeks in August. Nobody in the American military officially acknowledged it either. Tommy Harker flew 43 combat missions between March 1943 and February 1944. He shot down 11 confirmed enemy aircraft, 9 of them in August 1943 using the cracked sight modification. After the modification was banned, his hit rate dropped to the same level as everyone else. In February 1944, Tommy completed his required number of combat missions and rotated back to the United States. He was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters. The citations mentioned his bravery and accuracy, but said nothing about the sight modification. Tommy Harker was 24 years old when he returned to Plainview, Texas, in March 1944. He was discharged from the Army Air Forces in November 1945 with the rank of Technical Sergeant. He never opened the garage with Willie Chen. Willie was buried in New Guinea. Instead, Tommy went back to work at his uncle's watch repair shop on Main Street. He fixed pocket watches and mantel clocks. He got married in 1947 to a school teacher named Dorothy. They had 3 children. He bought a small house on the edge of town. He coached Little League baseball. He attended church on Sundays. He never talked about the war. His neighbors knew he'd been a gunner in the Pacific. They knew he'd won some medals, but Tommy didn't keep the medals displayed. They were in a box in the closet. When people asked about the war, Tommy said it was a long time ago and changed the subject. In 1987, a graduate student at Texas Tech University was researching bomber defensive tactics in the Pacific Theater. He found the after-action reports from the 43rd Bombardment Group. He noticed the statistical anomaly in August 1943, the sudden spike in tailgunner effectiveness, the equally sudden return to baseline in September. The graduate student tracked down surviving members of the 43rd Bombardment Group. He interviewed 7 former tailgunners. 5 of them remembered the cracked sight modification. 2 of them remembered Tommy Harker's name. The graduate student drove to Plainview, Texas in March 1988. He found Tommy working in his garage, rebuilding a carburetor for a 1965 Ford pickup truck. Tommy was 68 years old. His hands were still steady. The graduate student explained his research. He asked about the cracked sight. He asked about the 15-degree angle, the kill zone, the unauthorized modification. Tommy remembered all of it. He explained the mathematics. He explained the watch repair background. He explained Willie Chen and the promise he'd made. He explained how the modification had worked and why the Army Air Forces had banned it. The graduate student asked why Tommy had never told anyone about this, why he'd never sought recognition. Tommy shrugged. It was just something that worked for a while, then it didn't. That's war. The graduate student included Tommy's story in his dissertation. The dissertation was read by approximately 47 people, mostly academics and military historians. It received no media attention. It won no prizes. Tommy Harker died on April 3, 1998, at the age of 78. The cause of death was heart failure. His obituary in the Plainview Daily Herald mentioned that he was a World War II veteran and a long-time watch repairman. It said nothing about the 11 enemy aircraft he'd shot down or the modification that had saved dozens of lives during 3 weeks in August 1943. Tommy was buried in the Plainview Cemetery, 5 miles east of town. The funeral was small. His wife, Dorothy, his 3 children, 9 grandchildren, and about 30 neighbors and friends attended. A VFW honor guard fired a rifle salute. Someone played taps. There is no memorial to Tommy Harker's innovation. The cracked sight modification is not mentioned in official Air Force history. The technique is not taught at gunnery schools. Most historians who study World War II air combat have never heard of it. But for 3 weeks in August 1943, over the Solomon Sea and New Britain, tail gunners using broken sights and unauthorized modifications shot down more enemy aircraft than they had in the previous 5 months combined. For 3 weeks, the death position became the kill position. And then bureaucracy put a stop to it, and everyone went back to dying at the same rate as before. If this story of innovation against bureaucracy moved you, if you're amazed that a broken sight and a 15-degree angle saved lives while the official equipment failed, then hit that like button right now. Stories like Tommy Harker's deserve to be remembered, and your engagement helps make that happen. Subscribe to this channel to hear more forgotten stories of courage and ingenuity from World War II. These aren't the stories you learned in school. These are the stories of ordinary people who saw problems and solved them, even when regulations said they couldn't. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever had to break the rules to make something work? Have you ever solved a problem that the official solution couldn't fix? We want to hear from you. And thank you for keeping Tommy Harker's memory alive. He never sought recognition. He never told his story except once, to a graduate student, 43 years after the war. But his story matters. His innovation matters. The lives he saved matter. We remember them here.